Thank you, Dr. Sriharsha, for giving me this opportunity to present every month. As I have told last time, it has become a ritual for me to try searching. They do come like on daily basis. So I'm really thankful to you. So are you able to see my screen, Dr. Sriharsha? Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. You can begin.
Okay. Okay. So, hello everyone who have joined this webinar from all parts of the world. Let us begin our sixth episode. So before that, I have few disclaimers. I have nothing to disclose. I have taken informed consent from all the patients shown in the presentation. I'm sharing my personal experience, and I have some point of time you will find that I don't have data to back up like my claims or my clinical this thing decisions, and there are many aspects of these cases which I still don't know. Like I'm still I try to find answers. And today's learning objective is I will discuss few cases, interesting cases of positional vertigo, one case of recurrent acute vestibular syndrome, and few cases of psychogenic dizziness if the time permits. So before that, I would like to request everyone to go on menti.com. You can open another browser in your mobile phone, or you can like if you are sitting in front of a PC, you can use another device, or same device also you can go to this www.menti.com and use this particular code, so that we'll try to make this like lecture interactive. So because I'm not able to follow the comments in the chat box, so that I have subscribed to this particular menti.com, and if you can start voting, I will come to know that you have I will start the countdown, and maybe I will give 30 seconds, so that if I get some responses, I can begin the presentation. So okay. I'm not getting a live input. I don't know why. We'll try another slide maybe. So I don't know whether it is working or not. Okay, those who have joined just now, just go to the menti.com and use this code, so that you can we will try to make it interactive. But I don't know why I'm not able to see this the live inputs. It's okay, we'll start the presentation. Okay, so today I'm going to show present cases. Like first, these are the bonus cases. If we have time, we will go ahead with those cases. So let us start with the case number one. 37-year gentleman. He presented to me with spinning vertigo lasting less than a minute, and it was triggered by positional changes. And he described that he was getting the vertigo on getting up from bed and climbing down the stairs. It was associated with the vomiting, and he had continuous mild feeling of dizziness in between the attacks. And history of he had history of severe vertigo 2 months ago, which lasted for 3 weeks. Like whole episode lasted for 3 weeks, and the current episode was spontaneous as well as triggered by positional changes. Like that was odd to me. Like it was not typically looking like a BPPV. So then I did his positional testing. So the clinical syndrome here we are dealing with is positional vertigo, like episodic vestibular syndrome, which is positionally triggered. So I did his positional testing. He had symptoms in the distal pike right. He had symptoms with a beating torsional nystagmus, which was the upper pole was beating to the right. Then on sitting up, he had dizziness, but there was no nystagmus. In distal pike left, he didn't have any symptoms, but there was a beating torsional nystagmus. Again, the upper pole was beating to the right. So on the in the left distal pike also the similar variety of nystagmus I saw, that is upbeating torsional, dextrocyclorotatory, that is upper pole beating to the right, or it was earlier called as counterclockwise nystagmus. Then on getting up, he had downbeating torsional levocyclorotatory nystagmus from the distal pike left position. So looking at this variety of nystagmus, those who have heard my previous presentation, like Vertigo Talks episode 5, you would recollect that we thought of same sense nystagmus was seen. Then I went ahead with head roll right, which again showed the upbeating torsional nystagmus with dextrocyclorotatory nystagmus, and there were symptoms. And head roll left, again it showed a beating torsional nystagmus, and it was having again upper pole beating to the right. So again, one more point I would like to emphasize is it is not the positional testing which decides the canal and the side. It is the quality of nystagmus which decides the canal side and canal type. Okay. And then I did supine straight head extension, that is also called as deep head hanging maneuver, which again showed the upbeating torsional dextrocyclorotatory nystagmus. There was a mild horizontal component like right beating. So it was a diagonal nystagmus. It was diagonal nystagmus towards the right side. So these were the findings. So, and again on like getting up, the patient had mild dizziness and downbeating torsional levocyclorotatory nystagmus. So if you are able to vote, I would be able to see your voting. Like you go to this menti.com and like join this particular 16, and I will be able to see the voting online, like live. I will be able to see, but I don't know how I'm not able to see it. I will make it 10 seconds. Okay. I don't know how I'm not able to see, but it's okay. So these were the, okay, in the chat box also you can like type your answers. So these were the four possibilities I thought of, and the patient had same sense nystagmus. The higher intensity of nystagmus is the side of the I got one response, that is right posterior canal. Yes, right posterior canal BPPV should be considered because the upper pole was beating to the right. So we have gone through this algorithm, that is a please maneuver on, we should proceed with in patients with bilaterally symptomatizing or both sided nystagmus, we should proceed with a please maneuver on one side, that is in this case right side. If there is bilateral resolution of symptoms and nystagmus, it is unilateral BPPV, that is right posterior canal BPPV. If there is only unilateral resolution, that is only right-sided symptoms resolve and the left-sided symptoms remain, then it is a bilateral BPPV, and then we can proceed with the other side Epley's maneuver. And if there is no resolution of symptoms, then there are various possibilities. That is, I will discuss those. In 30 to 35% patients, there is no resolution of symptoms, and 60 to 65 to 70% patients, there is either unilateral or bilateral resolution of symptoms. And in same sense, nystagmus, 89% of the times, if there is a resolution, it is unilateral BPPV, and still it could be bilateral in 10% cases. If there is no resolution of symptom, it could be either unilateral or even bilateral, or the unilateral BPPV could be same side BPPV with failed maneuver or opposite side BPPV. And in case if the patient is not improving despite of repeated maneuvers, we should also consider other causes of positional vertigo. So in this case, as many of you have pointed out, that it is a typical right posterior canal BPPV. So I thought of it is bilaterally symptomatizing unilateral BPPV, and I proceeded with Epley's maneuver for the right posterior canal. So in Epley's maneuver, what we do is in right-sided Epley's maneuver, the patient lies down, and then on the right dick sulci position, then we turn the patient's position to the left, and then just I'll show you. Okay. So from this right dick sulci position, we turn the patient to the left, and then the patient goes to the this position. Like we started with this position, particular position. Okay, I hope you are able to see the annotations. Somebody can just type in comment like if you are able to see the annotations. So these are the positions which yes, thank you so much. So these are the positions. We start with this position, and then we go into this the second position, then we go into this third position, and then the patient gets up. Okay, this is the fourth position. So in this particular patient, the patient had upbeating torsional nystagmus, dextrorotatory. Okay, and then in the position 2, the patient had, I think, okay. Okay. In the position 2, the patient didn't have any symptoms and nystagmus. Position 3, the patient had downbeating torsional nystagmus. And it is considered as an unfavorable nystagmus. According to the studies, we should get upbeating torsional nystagmus in this particular position, that is position 3. And position 4, there were no symptoms and no nystagmus. So in position 2, there was one study in 2007, there was one study which said that if there is orthotopic nystagmus, that is upbeating torsional nystagmus in this particular position of position 2, then it is of favorable prognosis. But later on, another study came in 2020, another study came, and which says that it is more important to see this orthotopic nystagmus in the position 3 than the position 2. Okay, so position 3 is more important as compared to the position 3 to see the upbeating torsional nystagmus. So then what I did is I rechecked the patient after 30 minutes. Like I asked the patient to wait, and I rechecked. In the dick sulci position 1, that is right side, the patient had there were no symptoms, and the patient had upbeating torsional nystagmus. So I saw this dissociation between the symptom and nystagmus. Usually in cases of BPPV, the symptoms and the nystagmus are married with each other. Like, okay, the symptoms and the nystagmus are married with each other, and you see the symptom as well as nystagmus go hand in hand. Okay, But in this particular patient, what I saw was there were dissociation between the symptoms and nystagmus. Then in position 2, again, the patient didn't have anything, but again, in position 3, oh, what happened? One second. Are you able to see my screen properly? There is some issue. Dr. Sriharsha? Okay. So this is about the orthotopic nystagmus in position 3, and I didn't get that, and I got downbeating torsional nystagmus in position 3. And again, I felt that, okay, I called the patient next day. I told him that you come on the next day, and I was eagerly waiting for the patient to come back and see me. And one second. Dr. Sriharsha, can you disable my annotation? Maybe that is an issue. Maybe disable the annotation. Okay.
Sir, I don't think I can do that now.
Okay, no problem. Okay. Okay. So, follow-up day 1, there were no improvement in the symptoms, and the patient had a headache. He was complaining of headache. So, then I did like positional testing on day 1 follow-up, like next day when the patient came. And the new findings I'm going to put into like brackets. When I did the Dix-Salpike right, there were no symptoms. On Dix-Salpike left, the patient had symptoms. Then instead of upbeating nystagmus, the patient had downbeating nystagmus in like in the Dix-Salpike left. On the right side, again, he had upbeating torsional like dextrocyclorotatory nystagmus. And there was additional right beating component. And instead of downbeating torsional, after getting up, the patient had upbeating torsional nystagmus. And in supine straight head extension, instead of the upbeating torsional, the patient had downbeating torsional nystagmus. So I was literally confused, like what happened to this patient. Yesterday he had upbeating torsional on both sides. Now he is having upbeating on one side and downbeating on the other side. The symptoms were there on the right side. Now their patient was having symptoms on the left side. Then I thought, let us focus on the findings of left distal pipe and let us analyze the case fresh. So these are the like options I considered. Like I thought of different things like left typical posterior canal BPPV, left apogeotropic posterior canal BPPV, whether it is a patient, he has bilateral posterior canal. The right one I treated, and now is the left sided some like either apogeotropic or anterior canal BPPV. So what I thought of in this patient is I thought of left apogiotropic posterior canal BPPV in this patient, on depending on the fresh findings. And if you see this algorithm again, I thought that the patient had resolution of symptoms on the right side, and now the patient is having nystagmus and symptoms on the left side. So I thought the patient has bilateral BPPV, and I decided to go ahead with the maneuver based on the fresh findings. So what I did is quick liberatory rotation maneuver I proceeded with. And in quick liberatory rotation maneuver, from this position you directly go to the third position. Like when from this position, instead of going to the this second position, directly you go to the third position. Like sorry, this position third. Okay, so this is how the quick liberatory rotation maneuver is performed. And again, there was a different upbeating torsional nystagmus in position 3. Like earlier it was downbeating torsional here. Now I got upbeating torsional, and position 1 was downbeating instead of upbeating. On follow-up day 2, like day 3 of his like visit to me, he was feeling much better, but he was still feeling dizzy on and off. I was not happy with the treatment. Like he was not completely feeling better. Then on the day 2 of the follow-up, I did his Dix-Halpike testing, and I will mention in the boxes. These are the findings which are on the first day, but these are the findings which are the fresh. He again had symptoms in the Dix-Halpike right. Again, on the left side also he was having symptoms. There was downbeating torsional nystagmus on in Dix-Halpike left, with additional right beating component, and there was no nystagmus on sitting up, and there was upbeating nystagmus on sitting up from the right side. So again, looking at this finding, I thought the patient is feeling better, but why is he not like this nystagmus is not improving? His symptoms are still there, but these symptoms were definitely less as compared to the first day when I saw him. Then again, I did his quick liberatory rotation maneuver, and these are the findings. From here, this position, you have to go to the third position directly, and these were the findings. So the patient had symptoms in position 1 as well as the position 4 on getting up. So I was not quite happy with the kind of findings I was getting, and it was not smelling like BPPV to me. Like it was not looking like a BPPV. So then I went into his history of headache, like the headache he was complaining. It was from 2 months, and it was holocranial in location. It was mild in intensity. It was twice per month his frequency. There was no tinnitus. He was feeling blockage of his right ears on and off from lasting for 10 seconds. Then I thought of in this patient as migrainous positional vertigo, and I started him on propranolol 20 milligrams with zolmitriptan SOS. Like as soon as he gets headache, I told him to take zolmitriptan. And I requested MRI because of these findings. Like I thought, let us better to get the MRI done, and it was normal. On follow-up day 8, he was feeling much better. He was feeling 90% better. And so what is the final diagnosis out of these three, like whether it is bilaterally symptomatizing unilateral BPPV, or it is a bilateral BPPV, posterior canal BPPV, or migrainous positional vertigo? Oh, I'm able to see the voting now. I'm so happy to see that. So yes, those who haven't voted, you can go to menti.com and you can uh, type this code, and you can vote. Yes, yes, it can be something different also, but in this clinical setting, I thought of migrainous positional vertigo as patient responded to the migraine prophylaxis, and the positional testing findings were not like BPPV, like they were changing and the patient was not feeling good, and there was dissociation between the nystagmus and symptoms. Okay, so coming to the this vestibular migraine I thought of, so I will translate this particular dialogue from a movie Golmaal 3. That is vestibular migraine. A lot of things happen in vestibular migraine which are not logical and they are magical. Like I feel that many times you get perplexed in the vestibular practice, then treat them as a case of vestibular migraine if the MRI is normal and you have ruled out the other causes. So, patients with migraine can have higher incidence of BPPV, that is 4.1 times. The odds ratio of having BPPV in patients with migraine is 4.1 times. And migrainous positional vertigo can also happen. So, in a patient with migraine, first, think of BPPV and try to treat them, and you can get MRI done in those cases. And if the MRI is normal, you can call it as migrainous positional vertigo, which is a type of vestibular migraine. So in my registry, I made an analysis where if you see the duration of symptoms in vestibular symptoms, if it is less than 1 minute, we call it usually consider BPPV as the most common diagnosis. 20 minutes to 12 hours Meniere's disease, and hours to days it is acute unilateral vestibulopathy, and going on for weeks to months is bilateral vestibulopathy. So in my registry, that time when I analyzed 258 patient data, currently I have around 500 patients with vestibular migraine. I found that migrainous positional vertigo is a very common entity. Many patients have positional vertigo, and which is lasting for less than 1 minute, and which doesn't go in favor of typically positional testing doesn't show typical findings of BPPV. So do consider this as a differential diagnosis in patients with like BPPV, positional vertigo. Now, so there are many aspects of life, our life, which are beyond our limitations of logical mind. And vestibular migraine is also the findings what we get is beyond our logical explanation sometimes. And I feel that it is a mystical dimension in neurotology. Even I have seen cases of vestibular migraine presenting as drop attacks. I heard a lecture where it can present like MDDS, multi-debarkment syndrome. So there are various manifestations the way vestibular migraine can present. So if you have ruled out central cause and you are not able to find out any peripheral cause, the best policy is to treat, give prophylaxis, prophylactic therapy like a vestibular migraine, and you will find that patients do respond. Coming to case number two, he 53-year gentleman, spinning vertigo lasting for 30 minutes. From 3 months ago, he had severe spinning vertigo which lasted for 30 minutes. And he was also he developed
Vishal.
tinnitus in the left ear. There was no hearing loss. Professor Eleftherios, do you want to make any comment?
Yes, if I make a comment before you move on to the second case. With regards to the history and what you described in the beginning, one thing I noticed is that you mentioned that the patient had episodes while walking down the stairs. For me, this does not,
Yeah.
I don't know if everyone agrees with me on this. It does not give me the impression that we are talking about BPPV when a patient is walking down the stairs, because simply the head isn't moving.
Yeah. Professor, in this patient, that's what the point I want to emphasize is it was not like smelling like BPPV from beginning. And I presented it like a BPPV because I personally felt it was BPPV initially. But as the patient was not showing improvement and the nystagmus was not correlating with any particular canal, so then I considered vestibular migraine. So do you agree with the diagnosis of migrainous positional vertigo?
That's another point I would like to make. Migraine vertigo. For me, I would call it vestibular migraine, knowing that there are cases of vestibular migraine that have a positional component. So I find it interesting that you call it migrainous positional vertigo, but if this is vestibular migraine, then we should just call it vestibular migraine, even though there is a positional component to her episodes, because this is what is seen in the literature. Now, vestibular migraine, does the patient have migraine episodes?
Yeah, patient was getting attacks of headache twice per month. And that's what after exclusion of other causes, it is definitely a vestibular migraine. It is just a difference of semantics because vestibular migraine presenting like a positional vertigo. So that's why I called it as migrainous positional vertigo. But ultimately, it is vestibular migraine only. Yeah, you're right. So shall I proceed with the case
So
two
how
so
would you
that,
explain?
yeah.
All right, okay.
Yeah, Professor. Yeah. Okay. Dr. Sriharsha, shall I proceed with case two? And
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
yeah. So this case is case number two is a 53 year gentleman, spinning vertigo lasting 30 minutes. I described this. Then the patient had audiogram which was normal during the attack, like this attack, audiogram was done. And then he presented to me from with 3 months history of getting positional vertigo on turning to left side in supine position. He was scared of changing position to left side, and he had sleepless nights. He tried sleeping, I'm sorry for the spelling mistake, tried sleeping in sitting position. He was so scared of getting that vertigo. And in right lateral position also, he used to sleep. He was scared of changing his position to the left side. And due to the fear of vertigo, it was going on for last 3 months. So 3 months the patient had sleepless nights because of this. And in the associated symptoms, the patient had headache, which was holocranial, once every 2 months. And patient also had a history of motion sickness in the childhood. So again, I would request all of you to vote. So those who have joined just now or later, you can go to the menti.com and use the code 594716. Okay. Okay. I got 3 votes. One is saying like vestibular migraine. So 2 and 3 means vestibular migraine with BPPV. Okay. And the 1 and 3. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for the responses. Yes, I did think of everything. Like I thought of these differential diagnoses. Honestly, I was thinking of whether it is vestibular migraine, Meniere's, or BPPV. So I proceeded with his VNG. First, I will tell you like the positional testing findings. The disc sulpike on right, there were no symptoms and nystagmus. On sitting up also, there were no symptoms and nystagmus. When the patient in the disc sulpike left, the patient had symptoms and left beating nystagmus. That was geotropic variety of nystagmus in the horizontal nystagmus. And in head roll right, the patient didn't have symptoms and nystagmus, but on head roll left, the patient had left beating horizontal nystagmus, and this is the slow phase velocity I have mentioned. Okay, and in this particular patient, the patient was little obese, and I had difficulty in turning his neck to right and left during the head roll. And I did duration of testing in the head roll right and left is 30 seconds. I will elaborate about that in later, because why, what happened because of that, and what pitfalls, like what mistakes I did, I will tell you later. So what happened? So yes, now you can go and vote. So which BPPV it is? Uh, so the patient had a geotropic nystagmus on turning to the left side. So I have got yes. Now the left lateral canal BPPV is rising. Okay. So some people still feel it is right lateral canal BPPV. Okay, I have got 7 votes. Let us proceed with this. I thought of left lateral canal BPPV, a geotropic variety, and then I started the Guffoni maneuver. Okay, in Guffoni maneuver, in position 1, the patient is sitting. Then we take the patient to the right side. Okay, it is like a head roll on right. The patient had geotropic right beating nystagmus, and their latency was 50 seconds. After 50 seconds, I saw a severe bout of nystagmus. Usually in this, I'm sorry, there were severe symptoms actually in this position after 50 seconds. Usually in this position, we get mild symptoms, or there are no symptoms when you perform Guffoni maneuver in this position. Usually there are mild symptoms, but patient had very severe symptoms in this position, and then I started feeling that there is something fishy. In position 3, when I turned the neck down, then there were no symptoms and no nystagmus. And in position 4, again, there were no symptoms and nystagmus. So again, I asked the patient to wait for 30 minutes, and like I was thinking what this patient is having, like so repeat this. These are the findings, repeat positional testing findings after 30 minutes. Head roll right, there was no symptom, there were no nystagmus. And head roll left, the patient had symptoms with left beating, again horizontal nystagmus. But this time this SPV first time was this, and it changed to this, like it reduced the slow phase velocity of the nystagmus reduced during the repeat positional testing. So again, this is my question to all of you. You can vote. Which maneuver shall I do? Like, shall I go with the fresh head roll test findings, or shall I go for the findings which I saw while doing the Guffoni maneuver? So whether it is a right lateral canal BPPV, or it is a left lateral canal BPPV, like shall I proceed with which maneuver? Okay, so I have got 3 votes. All are saying that I should proceed with Guffoni maneuver for left lateral canal. So what I did in this patient, I thought of right lateral canal BPPV, additional lateral canal BPPV, because the nystagmus which I saw in the like while doing the Guffoni maneuver was severe, and the patient had severe symptoms. So then I performed the Guffoni maneuver for the right side. And while performing the Guffoni maneuver for the right side on the same day, after waiting for 30 minutes, the patient had these findings. Again, the patient had severe symptoms in the position, this position 2. Okay. So when you are performing the Guffoni maneuver for the right side, you take the patient to the left side. Okay. And this is similar to the head roll left. But the patient again had severe symptoms in this position, and patient had nystagmus with this low phase velocity. Then what I did is I asked the patient to come next day, because I have already performed the Guffoni maneuver for the left side. I have performed the Guffoni maneuver for right side. Then I told the patient to come next day. Follow up on the next day, there were no symptoms at all. And these were my expressions. Like I was very happy to see that the patient was feeling better. And patients, they told me that first time I slept well in last 3 months. I slept like a baby. These are the patient words. Patient was telling I slept like a baby. I didn't have any vertigo in any of the positions, and the repeat positional testing was negative. So again, in this patient, it smelled like BPPV. I felt like the findings and everything was going in favor of BPPV because the patient had immediate improvement. So again, I would like to ask all of you whether it was a bilateral BPPV or it was only left-sided BPPV or right-sided BPPV. So yes, professor is saying still not sure. Yes. Fortunately, the patient was feeling better after 3 months in a day after doing the maneuvers. So I thought at this particular point of time that the patient had bilateral lateral canal BPPV. So in this patient, I feel that he had bilateral lateral canal BPPV. Yes, I need to follow this patient to come to a conclusion regarding whether he has underlying vestibular migraine, because he does have migraine, underlying migraine. So I have asked him to follow, and like if there is any new thing in the follow-up, I'll definitely let you know. But at this juncture, I feel that from last 15 days, 15-20 days, he's feeling better. He didn't come for follow-up, and there is improvement in his symptoms, which he was suffering from last 3 months. So points I learned in this case, rather I would say points the mistakes I did in this patient was I did the initial positional testing for 30 seconds. So I would wish we must do the head roll testing at least for a minute. Sometimes it might happen that we are not able to bring the otoconia into the play, and it might happen that it might result into the negative testing. And one modification I did in this particular patient is, instead of going for the typical supine head roll McEwer-Pagnini maneuver, I did this because the patient's neck flexibility was reduced. He had a short neck. I did this testing instead of the head roll. Instead of the head roll, I did Guffoni position as right head roll and left head roll. And I checked on the next day, I checked like this, so that, and I kept the position for 50, not 50 seconds, 1 minute, so that we can be sure that there are no further particles. Like now, coming to the case number 3, 57 years female, spinning vertigo lasting less than a minute from 1 day. Patient had positionally triggered attacks on turning to right, getting up from supine. And there was history of positional vertigo 10 years ago. And patient was a known case of hypertension, diabetes, and coronary artery disease. So I did disc sulpike maneuver, and these were the findings. There were no symptoms, but patient had a mild nystagmus, like with this slow phase velocity. And on disc sulpike left, the patient had left beating. This was right beating nystagmus. Actually, this is right beating nystagmus. And the slow phase velocity was more on the left side. Then on head roll right, the patient didn't have symptoms, but the patient had geotropic right beating nystagmus with this slow phase velocity. And on head roll left, the patient had symptoms, but the slow phase velocity was lesser as compared to the right side. So in this patient, you will find there are 4 different things. The symptoms were severe on the left side. Okay, symptoms were severe on the left side. The slow phase velocity of the nystagmus was more in the disc sulpike position, on the left side, and on head roll right the slow phase velocity was highest. If we compare between the head roll right and left, the slow phase velocity of the head roll right was more as compared to the left. So again, these are the findings which I got in this particular patient. Okay, so can you please like I have like this question, like which one you rely on, whether you will rely on, considering that it is a BPPV, what will you rely on? Symptom severity in Dix-Hallpike, symptom severity in supine roll, nystagmus severity during Dix-Hallpike left, nystagmus severity during supine roll, or patient sleeping position. Which one will you rely? Okay, I got one vote. Nystagmus severity during supine roll. I'll just wait for a few more votes. Okay. Okay, I'll proceed with this. Okay, nystagmus severity in supine roll. Yes. Let's see. Okay, I got one more vote saying on similar lines. Okay. And what is the diagnosis? At this juncture, what will you consider? Like whether it is a right lateral canal BPPV geotropic variety or left lateral canal BPPV geotropic variety? Okay, most of the people are saying it is right lateral canal BPPV, and they are going in favor of the nystagmus slow phase velocity in the head roll position, not in Dix-Hallpike, not with the patient symptoms. Okay, that's great. So I thought of a left lateral canal BPPV. I was confused at this particular juncture, and I went ahead with the diagnosis of left lateral canal BPPV, and I did Guffoni maneuver for the left side. And Guffoni maneuver for the left side starts with sleeping down to the right side of the patient. Okay, this is the position one. And the patient had severe instead of not having symptoms, the patient had severe symptoms in this position, and the patient had geotropic right beating nystagmus which had severe very high slow phase velocity. Again, I had I felt that I'm doing something wrong, and there is something fishy, and I could not continue with the Guffoni maneuver because the patient had severe symptoms in that position, and I stopped doing the maneuver, and I went to this sitting position, and all the votings I got, you all are right. Like it was right lateral canal BPPV, and you have rightly pointed out that it is the slow phase velocity of nystagmus in supine roll, which is very important as compared to the symptoms in Dix-Hallpike, symptoms in supine roll, or slow phase velocity in Dix-Hallpike. So the most important parameter is slow phase velocity of the nystagmus in the supine roll, which is a more specific test. And my question to the otoconia in the right lateral canal was, where were you hiding when the storm broke? So that was my question to the otoconia. What happened? Like they were not into the play when I did the supine roll. So remember these points, like do the supine roll for minimum 60 seconds, and you make use of these Guffoni positions, right and left. First position for the head roll. And I did Guffoni maneuver for the right side, and the patient patient did have symptoms, but they were less severe in the head roll left. And the patient position 3, there were no symptoms. Position 4 and follow-up day 1, the patient had 75% improvement, although there was dizziness on turning to the right. He didn't feel steady while walking, and it smelled like BPPV to me. Like you have to really, what happens, I agree with the professor, and there are like other talks also I have heard, where the positional vertigo is an entity where the first diagnosis usually as a first diagnosis you consider is BPPV. But if it is not smelling like BPPV, then there are other things to consider, that is vestibular migraine presenting with positional vertigo, or there are other findings which I'm going to show you. So this was my expression when the patient was feeling good. And what I learned is in diagnosing cases, I fail every now and then. Every day when I practice, like I try to judge the side, I fail every now and then, but keep doing the maneuvers. They are of evidence based. They are, and spend time with patients, and treatment of BPPV is really rewarding. If the patient improves, it is very rewarding. So in the BPPV practice, what happens, like patients with BPPV, many patients, 50 to 60% patients undergo natural resolution. Whatever you do, patient undergo a natural resolution. Like you give medicines to them, you give neck physiotherapy, you give do positional maneuvers. There are some group of patients who will definitely improve whatever is done. But there is a group of patients who don't improve with medicines, and these are the patient in the initial practice, they will land up to you, and then they will need, definitely they will need maneuvers. If they are not improving with medicine, there is no natural resolution. Definitely you have to offer something thing to the patient, and definitely if you do the maneuvers and treat the patient, it is rewarding. These patients will become your ambassadors. They will, if they get another attack of BPPV, they will come back to you on the first day, and they will it is rewarding actually. It gives immense professional satisfaction when you treat a patient who is suffering from 3 months, 5 months, and patient feels good next day. So again, that question I will ask. I have already revealed the answer, but you have already given the correct answer, all of you. Like that is the most important thing while doing in lateral canal BPPV is nystagmus severity in the supine role. Is the most important thing we should look for. So the points I learned from this case are: rely on slow phase velocity of the nystagmus in supine head roll. If possible, do the maneuver, the head roll testing for 60 to 90 seconds. You can modify it to Guffoni position 1 or 2, 1 for patients with restricted neck movement. These two modifications you can do. And don't rely on Dix-Hallpike findings, subjective patient symptoms, and side of the lying down. Even side of the lying down was also not reliable in my earlier case number, I think 2. So my approach to positional vertigo is, first thing I consider is BPPV. But if the patient is not like improving with the maneuvers, the thing we should, the another diagnosis we should consider is vestibular migraine. At the same time, we should order for MRI brain, because if the patient is not recovering with positional maneuvers, and the other parts of VNG, if you do, you will find some footprints of vestibular migraine in the history and VNG. And what are the footprints of vestibular migraine? Current or past history of migraine, spontaneous and positional attacks, both spontaneous and positional attacks. In BPPV, it is less likely that you have spontaneous attacks, as Professor Eleftherios was pointing out, that you should not get spontaneous attacks, and if the head position is not in relation to the gravity, it is not common in BPPV. Then if a patient has history of motion sickness in childhood, and during the this smooth pursuit testing and optokinetic hyperventilation testing and subjective visual vertical testing with a background which is rotating, if the patients feel dizzy, then it goes in favor of vestibular migraine, because vestibular migraine patients do have this visual vertigo component. And I see varieties of nystagmus in patients with vestibular migraine, that is nystagmus without fixation. You can see all types of nystagmus like gaze evoke nystagmus, upbeating nystagmus, downbeating nystagmus, and patients can have head shaking induced, even downbeat nystagmus, hyperventilation induced cross coupled nystagmus, and there is a divorce between the symptom and the nystagmus. So during the positional testing. So these are the footprints of vestibular migraine in history and VNG. And the other diagnosis which we should consider is vestibular paroxysmia in patients with positional vertigo. I do have a few patients where I thought of BPPV initially. Later on, I started them on migraine prophylaxis, and the patient didn't improve. And I did MRI, and it showed I have at least 3 patients where this the patient they were turned to have vestibular paroxysmia. And again, the footprints of vestibular paroxysmia are hyperventilation induced nystagmus, some signs of vestibulopathy in VNG, response to carbamazepine and or gabapentin, and vascular loop on MRI. And of course, there are other central causes we should consider, which the MRI will help us to know. So coming to the case number 4, a 58 years gentleman. He came with history of spinning vertigo lasting less than a minute from 1 week. It was on getting up and changing position to left side. He had actually, I presented this case last time, but I wanted to show his what type of positional vertigo he had. He had almost like 20 episodes in last 16 years of positional vertigo, and there was no history of migraine, and he was a very lucky person who told me that he never had a headache in his life. So I really admire such patients who tell me this history, that they never had a headache in life. They are really lucky people, because headache is so common, and migraine and tension type headaches are so common in general population. Even I have severe migraine. So if you are a migrainer, you know how much headache it causes, how much loss of quality it causes, and how it affects our day-to-day work. So there was no history of migraine in this patient who had recurrent BPPV, no tinnitus. He had mild bilateral hearing loss. He had hyperlipidemia and vitamin D deficiency. Jagdish sir is saying he also has migraine. Yes, migraine is very common, especially among physicians and surgeons. It's doctors. It is very common. So in this patient, the cause of recurrence is, I thought, is vitamin D deficiency, hyperlipidemia. And in this patient, the findings were interesting. That's why I thought of sharing this case. So this patient had torsional dextrocyclorotatory nystagmus, and there were downbeating. It was downbeating torsional dextrocyclorotatory nystagmus in the Dix-Hallpike left. And honestly, in the supine straight head extension, the torsional component was predominant. So from these findings, which canal is affected in this particular patient? Patient has downbeating torsional nystagmus, and the torsional component was predominant in supine straight head extension. Okay, I think this slide is not live, maybe. So I thought of left apogeotropic posterior canal BPPV as the torsional component was predominant. First day and day 0, on the day of his consultation, I did quick liberatory Epley's maneuver. He was 25 to 30% better on day 1 of follow-up. Instead of Epley's maneuver, and then on the second day, I did his quick liberatory rotation maneuver. And on the day 2 of follow-up, he had 80% improvement, day 4, 90% improvement. He did have post-BPPV dizziness, for which I suggested him Brander of exercises. And day 10, he had mild dizziness on and off. And he was 95% better with respect to symptoms. So in this patient, I felt it was BPPV because the patient was had improvement and he had history of recurrent BPPV. There was no history of migraine. So coming to, I think this is the last case I will present for this day because I have already exceeded my time. 55-year gentleman, a known hypertensive, diabetic, hyperlipidemia, and this is his timeline. In December, he presented. He had started with severe continuous vertigo on 21st December, and it followed a day later by unsteadiness. He was feeling losing balance to right side. He also had blurring of vision. He was hospitalized. He underwent MRI brain, which was normal, and he was discharged on vestibular suppression. So it was acute vestibular syndrome, and over a period of 10 to 10 days, he was feeling better. He started improving. He joined his duties back here. Then again on 6th of January, he started feeling severe dizziness, and it was continuous unsteadiness. He was feeling losing balance to right side. He had severe blurring of vision, and the things were rotating. He was hospitalized again. Again, his MRI was done, and even total cardiology and ophthalmology workup was done, and he was discharged on vestibular suppressants. And this is the time where the patient first consulted with me on 17th of January by our ophthalmologist because the patient was having severe oscillopsia, like severe visual symptoms. That's why he came to me, and he was describing it as torsional oscillopsia. He's talking in Marathi, but you will understand from his expressions. He was telling me that it is not side to side movement. ओके ओके आणि काय केल्यानंतर बरं वाटतं? हा ते काय मग त्यामुळे तुम्ही काय करता हे ठेवता का? ठेवून दाखवा बरं. असं ठेवल्याने तुम्हाला बरं वाटतं? ओके. So what the patient told me that when he patches his right eye, he feels better, and it was a kind of torsional oscillopsia. Like he felt like the visual scene was rotating in a torsional way. And the triggers for the symptoms were postural, like sitting, standing, walking, and walking like fast. Motion stimuli like quick head movement, riding a car, housework, turning head to right. And visual, he was not able to see anything in the mobile phone because of this torsional type of oscillopsia. And the relieving factors were keeping the head stable, supine position, and closure of eyes, as well as the matching what he was trying. To summarize, this patient had two discrete episodes of acute vestibular syndrome, and MRI brain was done twice. It was normal. And the associated symptoms were headache. He had associated headache, which was occipital in location. It was throbbing in nature, mild in intensity. There were no aura symptoms. He didn't have tinnitus. So at this juncture, like clinically, what do you feel like at this? You can vote. You can go to this menti.com and use this code to vote. Okay. I got 3 votes. I would say everybody is right because at this point, even I was not sure like what the patient is suffering from. So these are the diagnostic possibilities I considered at this point of time. So let us go one by one with the VNG findings. So in this patient, I did his VNG, and there were some findings which I saw. Like his saccades were normal, but if you can see there is a suggestion that there is a uh, left beating nystagmus. Can you see here when the patient is looking to the left? This is the patient is looking to the right, and this is the pulse. This is the step. Okay, this is the step towards the right. This is the again the pulse towards the left, and this is the gaze holding on the left. So on holding the gaze on the left, you can see there is a suggestion that the patient has left beating nystagmus. Okay, and on holding the gaze to the right, the patient didn't have or very subtle nystagmus. So this is his testing of saccades on the testing of saccades in the vertical gaze, like vertical saccade testing. This is the eyes are moving from down to the up, okay, and this is eyes are moving from the up to the down, okay. And you can see here again, you can see that there is some form of nystagmus. You can see uh, so I could see that the patient had upbeating nystagmus, and when the patient is looking up, the patient had suggestion that he had upbeating nystagmus. Now coming to the horizontal smooth pursuit was normal, and in the vertical smooth pursuit there was some interesting thing which I saw. When the eyes were moving from this is okay, so vertical smooth pursuit, this is up and this is down, okay. When the eyes were moving from down position to the up, the patient had this kind of nystagmus pattern, like, so the patient had left beating type of nystagmus when the patient the eyes were moving from down to up, and when the eyes were moving from up to down, the patient didn't have much nystagmus like pattern, okay. So this is okay. Now it is, I think, clear that the patient had this type of eye movement when the eyes were going up, okay, and there was no similar pattern when the eyes were moving from up to down position. Then coming to the other findings, like in the nystagmus, if you look at the nystagmus findings, there was no spontaneous nystagmus, horizontal nystagmus in light, but the patient had left beating nystagmus in dark. In terms of vertical nystagmus, the patient had upbeating nystagmus in light, but there was accentuation of this upbeating nystagmus in dark. There was definite increase in the intensity of the nystagmus. I will show you the video. Actually, this patient had a torsional variety of nystagmus in the spontaneous gaze. You can see there are two components of this nystagmus. One is torsional component. If you can appreciate, look at this light which is reflected in the conjunctiva. You will appreciate the torsional component, and there was subtle upbeating component also to the nystagmus. So this was center gaze with fixation, and center gaze without fixation, the patient had a mild torsional component, which was like I will show you this. The patient had all the three components: the torsional component, upper pole was beating to the left, a beating component, and the left beating component. Okay, so I will proceed forward. So the findings were spontaneous torsional nystagmus, more than the upbeating on the center gaze. And on removing the fixation, the patient had additional aggravation of the upbeating component with additional left beating component. And in the Paul Braz's book of localization in neurology, you can find one reference that the central mechanisms can suppress the vertical and horizontal component as compared to the torsional component. That's why this patient had predominant torsional component only on with fixation, and without fixation the patient had all the components. So these are the findings, like other findings in on high frequency head shaking. The patient had again this different variety of nystagmus. I am going to show that biphasic variety of nystagmus the patient had, and there was no vertical component in high frequency head shaking. Hyperventilation, there was aggravation of the underlying left beating component, and there was aggravation of even the upbeating component. I will show you the videos. First, this is the head shaking. So in the head shaking, immediately after head shaking, you will notice there is a right beating component, right beating nystagmus, and which is followed by, there is a pause, and it was followed by left beating nystagmus, which was baseline nystagmus. And on hyperventilation, the patient, I will go directly here. Okay, the patient had severe left beating nystagmus, upbeating, and torsional nystagmus. So there was aggravation of underlying mixed variety of nystagmus on hyperventilation. So these are the findings of his nystagmus in the while the gaze testing. When I performed his gaze testing, the patient didn't have any nystagmus on the center gaze with fixation, like horizontal nystagmus I'm talking about, which was there in the without fixation. Left gaze, there was no nystagmus, but it was left beating in the left gaze. Uh, uh, Left beating in the up gaze also, and there was no nystagmus on the right gaze. And coming to the vertical nystagmus, there was no nystagmus on the left gaze, but there was severe upbeating nystagmus in the center gaze without fixation. Then you can see all the findings. They were upbeating nystagmus mostly in all the gazes the patient had, upbeating nystagmus, especially without fixation. And this is his head impulse test. On right side, the patient didn't have any corrective saccade, but on the left side, the patient had a catch-up saccade. So the findings were little perplexing to me, and his Unterberger's was also not like typical vestibular neuronitis. Like he was not pivoting to one particular side, but he had severe imbalance. Like you can see wide based stance, and he was not turning to right or left, but he was in maintaining the central position. He was not pivoting to one side. That is something odd. Like I thought of, like at this juncture, what is your diagnosis like based on the VNG findings and clinical like examination findings? So I'll proceed with the my what I thought of at this juncture. Actually, I'm not sure of the diagnosis, but so at this juncture I will just tell you how to localize vestibulopathy. In superior vestibular neuritis, patients will have horizontal with torsional with upbeating nystagmus. In inferior vestibular neuritis, the patient have a downbeating torsional nystagmus. And in trunk involvement vestibular nerve, the patients might have horizontal or horizontal torsional nystagmus. If whole labyrinth is involved, it is similar to the vestibular nerve proper involvement. So then I went into literature and I found in this reference the patient, I thought as a recurrent vestibular neuritis, and the reported recurrence rate of vestibular neuritis is 1.9 to 10.7%. And there are reports where they say that this is a paper from Professor Marco Mandela. Vestibular neuritis patient demonstrated low recurrence rate, and it affected the same year after 6 months and caused less severe symptoms. Okay, so this is another thing, and let me, yeah. And relapsing, another paper I saw was relapsing ipsilateral vestibular neuritis. Only 2% of vestibular neuritis patients are likely to suffer a new episode in the other year, whereas ipsilateral relapse is rare. And this group reported one case where the patient had ipsilateral relapse. So and there is another entity, if we don't consider it as vestibular neuritis, there is another entity which is described in literature, that is recurrent vestibulopathy. And in this particular study in 2009, they described around many patients, actually 105 patients they described of recurrent vestibulopathy, and the prognosis for patients with recurrent vestibulopathy is good. In a few cases, the diagnosis is provisional and will be subsequently changed to migraine or Meniere's disease. And this is another article on recurrent vestibulopathy from 2006. And the patient, they observed that concurrent headache and elevated SPAP ratio in electrococleogram was frequently observed in this patient. So I don't know in my patient whether it is a case of recurrent vestibular neuritis, recurrent vestibulopathy of unknown cause, or it is a case of vertebrobasilar ischemia, because I cannot explain such a severe torsional oscillopsia in this patient despite the illness being of 1 month or 2 months in duration. The patient still has severe torsional oscillopsia. The patient has little head tilt. There is improvement with patching, which is not commonly seen in patients with vestibular neuritis. He has normal MRI on 2 occasions, and I have added thiamine 100 mg recently, like 2 days ago. The patient came to me again for follow-up, and I started him on vestibular rehabilitation. So I'm not sure about the diagnosis, but I will like in future, our future meeting, I will explain like if there is anything new, I will definitely tell all of you. I have exceeded the time, so I will at this juncture, I will present the remaining cases in the next meeting, and this is my email address in case like you have any doubts. And I would like to thank all of you and Sriharsha for this opportunity, and now we can go for the question and answers.
Thank you, sir. For today's lecture, we have Dr. Lasya Sai Sindhu. She will be moderating the session. She is an upcoming neurologist in Hyderabad.
Okay.
I would hand out.
Good evening, sir. I'm Dr. Lasya from Hyderabad.
Good evening. Yeah.
Yes, sir. I haven't got any questions yet, but I have had one experience with this kind of case that you told right now. I happened to work with Anirban Viswas, sir, when I saw a similar case like this.
Okay.
The fifth case which you were talking about, and sir had told me that this is a case of benign recurrent vestibulopathy.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and he had treated them mainly with vestibular exercises.
Okay.
And also, the patient had a lot of depression actually.
Okay, okay, okay.
So, sir also gave him some antipsychiatric medications.
Okay.
He had given and it so happened that sir said he had been seeing such patients in his practice. So I just wanted
Oh.
to add to that.
Yeah, I'm a beginner in this practice, so maybe this is the first time I have seen a similar case. Like I have never seen a case who is presenting like recurrent acute vestibular syndrome. And in this patient, but honestly, I'm still very like skeptical of because the patient has so severe torsional oscillopsia and patient is not improving and definitely I will go through his PHQ-9 and GAD-7. I will assess his anxiety and depression and I would definitely consider this diagnosis. Really thank you for your inputs.
Thank you, sir. So, if there are any more questions from anyone, sir.
We
Also, I had a small doubt, sir. While you were thinking of bilateral BPPV cases,
Okay.
so is it okay to do to give the patient maneuver on the two sides? Like, do you give certain gap, or do you do it on the same day, or do you give certain gap before you do for the one canal and the other canal? Can you suggest on that?
Yeah, honestly, this is my third case of bilateral BPPV. I think in our Vertigo Talk series 2, I have presented a case of bilateral posterior canal. I am little impatient about treatment of BPPV. I would agree, and I treat on the same day. Because what happens is usually the patients come from long distance and you don't want them to I usually what I do is I ask them to wait for 30 minutes and I do a recheck. And if you see the case which I presented in recheck, I found that the patient has additional left-sided lateral canal BPPV also. So I thought let us treat it and let us see. But there is one disadvantage in treating it on the same day. Some patients can develop severe post BPPV dizziness. Some patients can develop, but fortunately, I had a post-traumatic bilateral posterior canal BPPV. He didn't develop, and this particular patient also didn't develop post BPPV dizziness. I was fortunate enough that the patient didn't have that post BPPV dizziness. But yes, I agree with you. The severe side should be treated first, and then we should go for the other side on the next day. But
Next day, yeah.
yeah, but what happens is actually in the repeat positional testing, you will come to know on the next day. If you don't ask the patient to wait, then next day you will come to know. But I generally ask the patient to wait for half an hour and I recheck. And in recheck, if I find that the patient has other side also affected, I go for the treatment. I'm a little impatient.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And
This is Dr. Pooja from Nainital. Can I
Okay,
add
ma'am.
something?
Okay. Yeah,
Actually,
yeah. Go ahead, ma'am.
yeah. We do not regularly do VNG testing and all. We basically diagnose the patient clinically. I do some Dix-Hallpike or supine roll maneuvers for diagnosing my cases. So, what I faced is the patient was complaining of vertigo on lying down towards the left side. And when I tested Dix-Hallpike and supine roll, during the lying down position, the tests were negative, but whenever the patient got up, he was complaining of dizziness with an nystagmus, which I could see towards the left side.
Okay.
So,
Ma'am, yeah.
yeah.
Was there any nystagmus associated with the sitting up vertigo?
I Yes, yes.
Okay, ma'am, this entity is called as sitting up vertigo, and
Okay.
basically there is one article by Professor Luigi Califano, who happens to be my I take advice many a times from him. I read his article, and he has in their article they have divided BPPV into two types: type 1 BPPV and type 2 BPPV.
Okay.
Type 1 BPPV, basically like the objective BPPV, in which you get symptoms as well as the nystagmus during the Dix-Halpide. Okay.
Right.
And there is another variety called as subjective BPPV, in which you get patients do feel symptoms, and
Right.
but they don't have nystagmus.
Okay.
In that subjective BPPV group, there are
Right.
two varieties. One is type 1 and type 2. The type 1 is during lying down, they get dizziness without nystagmus, and type 2 is sitting up vertigo. While getting up, they don't get while doing Dix-Halpide positions or head roll, but while getting up, they get sitting up vertigo, and they don't have nystagmus.
Right.
So,
Right.
but in your case, patient did have nystagmus, you said.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
But
And
honestly,
you said also during the head impulse test also, I could see that there was a lag towards the left side.
okay, and what type of presentation the patient had? Patient had episodic vestibular syndrome, or where patient had acute vestibular syndrome? Because that is
It
very
was
important.
BPPV, the patient presented with symptoms of vertigo when lying down towards his left side.
Okay, and what was the duration of each episode?
Each episode was lasting, he said, few seconds, like it was very short lived.
Okay,
And the whole room was spinning during that uh, moment. He
okay.
felt that whole room was spinning.
Okay, so ma'am, in your patient, basically what even like till 2 years ago, I was not using VNG,
Okay.
and I used to do this Dixalpike in light. That is, you have to look for the nystagmus. You have to see the patient in the light
Yes,
without VNG, and I was not using any other method of removing the fixation like Frenzels.
yes.
So over a period of time, what I have observed after starting the VNG system, I see that you can. There are patient does get nystagmus, but we are not able to pick up with the help of like if we are not using any method of removing the fixation, or if we are not doing VNG guided this positional testing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that is one of the pitfall, and I feel that VNG video nystagmography is an extension of clinical examination. For example, if a patient comes with chest pain, unless we do ECG, we will not come to know whether like ECG is an extension of clinical examination in case of cardiology. Similarly, I feel that in case of not only vertigo practice, in case of neurology or neurotology, I think VNG is an extension of clinical examination. You can observe every small eye movement. You can either see
Right.
it, or either based on the graphs you
Maybe
can.
I missed a nystagmus during the positional test.
Yeah, I might be the patient had nystagmus, but it is very difficult if you are doing it in light. Patients may not have this horizontal and vertical component might get suppressed, so patients might not you might not see any nystagmus during the positional testing.
Okay, okay. And sir, which VNG equipment do you suggest if I get one?
Okay, so I am using currently a Cyclops system balance eye,
Okay.
and there are many other options but I find that I'm quite happy with the VNG system.
Okay. And sir, what are your recommendations for MRI for a case of vertigo? Which all the sequences you order?
See, if the patient, generally 90% of times in the practice, the patients have clear-cut diagnosis. 10% cases, if I say, I go with MRI, like if there are some red flags to the diagnosis of peripheral vertigo. So in general, I ask for, it is a protocol now, like over a period of last 2 years, our radiologists are, now they know that interested in neurotology, and even I do for some other cause apart from vertigo. They are like in detail they are giving about they are mentioning about the vestibular system. I'm so happy that to have them in the department. And I order this seed sequence is very important to rule out vestibular paroxysmia. The diffusion method is very important to rule out a stroke. Then see, it depends on what kind of patient you are looking for. Like if you are dealing with a patient with acute vestibular syndrome, angio is also important. If you are dealing with a patient whom you are suspecting to have vestibular paroxysmia, seed sequence or fiesta sequence is important. So generally we do all the sequences in most of the patients.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for answering my questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Your session was really informative for all of us.
Yeah, thank you.
Sir,
Thank you, sir.
3 more questions from the chat box.
Yeah. So, I can read that. Can you throw some light on autonomic symptoms associated with vertigo patients and how to manage them? Yes, like vertigo patients can have autonomic symptoms, and there is a school of thought which says that patients with BPPV, after doing repositioning, the post BPPV dizziness, it could be related to the autonomic disturbance because otolith system has strong connections with the autonomic system and the blood pressure regulation. In fact, I gave a talk recently on orthostatic dizziness in International Vestibular Diploma. And while preparing for that lecture, I came to know so many aspects of orthostatic dizziness. And patients with post-BPPV dizziness, it is postulated. One of the hypotheses is that could be it is due to autonomic dysregulation, and which the patient gets adjusted after some few days. That's why the patient gets the dizziness only on upright posture and not in lying down position, or with every head movement they get because of otolith imbalance, and especially after in the upright posture they can get aggravation of those symptoms. And another thing is other autonomic symptoms also the patients can have vomiting, sweating. I have seen in some patients severe vomiting and sweating. They can even get syncopal attack, like profuse sweating and blackout also. I have seen in couple of cases because of strong vertigo, because what happens is the vestibular system has strong autonomic connections, so it can cause severe autonomic symptoms. And there are a group of patients who have autonomic cause of the dizziness. It is not neurological cause, it is autonomic cause which is leading to the dizziness. So there are orthostatic dizziness. If you see, it could be autonomic cause, or it could be non-autonomic or vestibular causes also. Like, for example, persistent postural perceptual dizziness. The patients feel dizzy when they get up. So that is actually related to the vestibular system. It is a functional disorder. It is not related to the blood pressure changes. So it is very important to take detailed history to come to a particular diagnosis. It is very important to check the blood pressure and pulse in standing and lying down. So autonomic symptoms are very important. It's a very good question. Then the next question is, what about which system do you use? I am at loss because I don't have any V hits at my clinic. Really, it's very important that we should, like, if it is to make the clinic comprehensive, it's very important to have the VHs, because especially the second case, the last case which I presented, where the patient has recurrent acute vestibular syndrome, it is very important to know that the patient, whether the patient had bilateral vestibular neuritis or unilateral in the same year the patient had another attack, or the patient really has vestibular peripheral vestibular affection or not. So it's very important, and currently I don't have, we are in the process of buying one, and maybe in few months we are planning to buy. Then the next question is, what is the management of sitting up vertigo? It's a very good question, and in the article which I quoted, by Professor Luigi Califano, they have mentioned there are, it is not only BPPV which is one of the differential in sitting up vertigo. The sitting up vertigo can be seen with BPPV, it can be seen with vestibular migraine, it can be seen in patients with Meniere's disease, it can be seen in other causes also. So it is very important to know what is exactly the root cause and treat the patient. Suppose it is BPPV you are considering, then you should treat the patient with I tell them to do Brand-Arrow exercises in this group of patient, because if the patient doesn't have any appreciable nystagmus even while using the VNG system, then it's better to like I tell them Brand-Arrow exercises, and I find that all the patients improve with Brand-Arrow exercises. Even otherwise also, if a patient is not having BPPV, you can tell these habituation exercises to the patient, and patients do improve in patients with sitting up vertigo. Then what is the, yeah, that is done. And thank you so much, Dr. Smell Bell. Thank you so much for your comments and question. I hope all of you are getting benefited by this Vertigo talk series. Dr. Sriharsha and Dr. Lasya, are there any other questions?
Sir, no, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I have learned a lot today.
Thank you so much.
So thank you, sir. We had one more very enlightening session. We'll seeing you back again on March 5th. That is the first Friday of every month, which we are following. So the next talk will be on March 5th, 2021. That is the first Friday of March, 7:30 Indian time.
Yes. Unfortunately, I'm ready with 4 cases for that presentation.
Very good, sir.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and I'm really thankful, because yeah, this Vertigo talk series is helping me also in my practice, and it is helping me to read more, to present it, and I'm really thankful for all the audience who are like attending these sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Good night, sir.
Good night. Thank you. Bye.